Hello guys, welcome to Easy Biology. Today's video is going to focus on respiration. So first, let's learn what respiration is. Think of respiration as breathing in and out. And well, that's not really true. Breathing in and out is actually a process called ventilation. Respiration happens in cells. Respiration is the release of energy from food and allows all the chemical processes that are needed for us to survive to happen. There are actually two types of respiration: aerobic and anaerobic, or fermentation, which I will cover later in the video. So now let's learn about why energy is needed in our bodies, and more specifically, in our cells. Just as you need energy to do all sorts of activities, such as running, your cells also need energy to carry out really important tasks. Some examples include cell division, which you will learn about soon, the making of proteins, something that I've already discussed. If you want to learn about it, I will leave a link in the description. Active transport, again, I will leave the link in the description to that video. Muscle cell contraction and the transmission of nerve impulses. So, what provides cells with energy? It's a molecule called ATP. ATP is short for adenosine triphosphate, but most people just call it ATP. Like the name implies, it is made up of one adenosine molecule and three phosphates. Every ATP molecule has a little bit of energy. That energy is released when ATP is broken down. When ATP is broken down, it is usually broken down into ADP, adenosine diphosphate. This means that you have an extra phosphate loose and a release of energy. Likewise, to remake ATP, when the phosphate is joined to ADP, energy is required. For the breakdown, an enzyme called ATPase breaks down ATP into ADP and pi. For regeneration, an enzyme called ATP synthase uses a little bit of energy to join ADP and pi to make ATP again. Some of the energy in respiration is used to make ATP. Some of it is also lost as heat. Remember enzymes? If you don't, I will leave a link. But enzymes have a condition that they work best in, their optimum condition. When you release heat, it is so that our body temperature is closer to the optimum temperature for enzymes. Okay, so now let's talk more about respiration. Earlier in the video, I said that there were two types: aerobic respiration and fermentation, or anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration happens when oxygen is present in a cell. Fermentation happens when there is a lack of oxygen in a cell. Let's talk about fermentation first. In fermentation, glucose, which we get from food, is converted into pyruvate. This then produces 2 ATP. In plant and yeast cells, pyruvate is converted into ethanol, which is a type of alcohol, carbon dioxide, and energy, which is the 2 ATPs that we made. I know that the diagram says glucose, and whilst that isn't wrong, it would be more specific to say pyruvate, as glucose is broken down to pyruvate before any conversions. This reaction isn't reversible because carbon dioxide can diffuse away. But a fun fact is that alcoholic drinks are made by fermentation. Ethanol is the alcohol that we drink, and the carbon dioxide makes it bubbly. In animal cells, when there is a lack of oxygen, the pyruvate is converted into lactate. You might have a low supply of oxygen in strenuous activities such as exercise, since you're struggling to breathe. Luckily, this is reversible, as when oxygen is available, so when you get your breath back after exercising, lactate is converted back into pyruvate. Which takes us to our next point, aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration occurs when oxygen is available. The products of aerobic respiration are carbon dioxide, water, and ATP, although much more ATP than fermentation. Aerobic respiration is a lot more complicated than fermentation since oxygen is involved, so there are more steps. The first stage is called glycolysis. Glycolysis is exactly like fermentation. Glucose is broken down into two pyruvate molecules by an enzyme. This in turn releases enough energy to produce two molecules of ATP. So in the first stage, only two ATP are produced. Since oxygen is present, we can move on to the second stage, the citric acid cycle and electron transport chain. Although these two are meant to be separate, however, I'm not going to go into much detail, so if you want to find out why they're named this way, I will leave a link in the description box. The second stage happens in the mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria is the site of aerobic respiration. The pyruvate enters the mitochondria and carbon dioxide is removed. Some ATP is produced as well. In the final step, and this is where oxygen is really important, oxygen reacts with hydrogen that is inside the mitochondria to make water. More ATP is also produced. 36 ATP are produced in the final step. So if you look back at the equation, you can understand a little bit about how these products were made now. All in all, if we add the 2 ATP that we made from glycolysis and 36 ATP that we made in the second stage, 38 ATP are produced in aerobic respiration, which is a lot more than in fermentation. Anyway, that's it for this video. Next week's video will be about producing new cells. Bye!